computer now and again. And I had opened my own website so I could post my chapters as I was calling them. By that time, I don't even remember how many chapters I had, but I realized it was no longer just a series of short stories. It was actually a book. Well, I didn't really think of it as a book per se, but it was becoming a whole. I called it Two Shall Become One, and I'll explain a little bit why that title was so important to me and still is. And that's how it started. I continued to write throughout that summer. Somewhere in there, a couple people would say to me, "Oh, Sharon, this is, really good. You should get this published." First few times anybody said that to me, I laughed hysterically. I had no thought of that, even though I was loving what I was doing. I still didn't really think of it as necessarily being something that would be out there to be in a book. But finally, after a few months, I thought, why not? Other people have written some Jane Austen stuff. It was becoming more prevalent out there, and so I thought I would give it a shot. So around October of that year, I did some more research into the publishing business, which I knew absolutely nothing about. A couple of things. First thing, when I really started researching how big the average book was, and I looked at how many words I had written, I had enough for easily 3 books, if not 3.5. And here I was thinking, oh, when I finish this, certain chapter, maybe I'll have a book. It's like, oh my. So I had to kind of split it apart and decide where I wanted my first book to end, and started writing query letters to agents in October. I was promptly rejected by every single one of them. And so I kind of gave it a rest, just continued to write and have fun with what I was doing, building up my fan base and enjoying myself over the holidays. And then around February of the next year, I thought, well, I'll give this a shot. I'll try it again. Wrote a million more query letters sent to agents, which were all promptly rejected. So I pretty much just decided that it wasn't really meant to be for me, that I'm a strong believer. I have a great faith, and I believe that some things are meant to be, and maybe some things just aren't. And I just looked at it and thought, well, I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying my writing, but apparently it wasn't really meant for me to get published. So I decided to just put it all together and self-publish it myself for those people who wanted something in a book form. I pursued that avenue, and in May of 2006, I self-published my first book, which is essentially the same thing that's here, my first book. Kind of at the same time, a girlfriend of mine who lives in the Netherlands wrote to me and told me about Sourcebooks Publishing Company, which is in Chicago. I'd never heard of them. They're an independent publishing company, and I'll tell you more about them if you're interested. But basically, they were different in many ways, but one of which is you could approach them directly, approach their editor directly without having to have an agent, which I had been unable to get. So I figured, what the heck, I've been rejected about 1 million times, what's another one? Sent my manuscript off and my query letter to Deb Worksman, who's the editor of Sourcebooks that handles their history and fiction line, and went ahead with my self-publishing pathway and got that done. We kind of forgot about it, more or less. And then on June 25th, my red letter day, and this is a great story. My kids are all smiling in the background. I worked night shift. I was sleeping that day. And as my children will tell you, they have a long unwritten rule in my house that unless the house is on fire or somebody has severed a limb, they do not wake me up for anything. So Deb called me that day. My daughter dutifully took the message and wrote it on the refrigerator board and went on her way. My husband, who worked in Selma at the time, he happened to be just totally a fluke, divine, I don't know, but he was working in Lemoore that day, and he came home for lunch, which he never ever did. And he saw the message there and immediately freaked out. Picked up the phone, started dialing the number as he's dashing into the bedroom to wake me up, and I'm like totally bleary-eyed and have no idea what he's talking about as he's thrusting the phone in my head saying, "It's Deb Worksman." She answers, I'm like, huh? What? Luckily, she has an incredible sense of humor. And I'll never forget, it's kind of the day we call it the call, us writers, and I'll never forget the first words out of her mouth were, after she laughed a little bit, were, I read the first few chapters of your book, and I absolutely love it, and I want to sign you. And I think I cried, but I knew I cried. So that was in June 25th of 2006. I'm sorry, 2007. I'm getting ahead of myself. By the time my first book came out, it had been 3 years, almost to the day, a little over, from